Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh here, and this is episode number 2100 of the I Am CEO podcast. And I feel like I haven't hopped on as much to really discuss all the different landmarks and opportunities that we've had and milestones that we've had in creating this episode. And please definitely know it has not been a straight path at all. It's definitely been a path that's been littered with lots of things that haven't gone the way you want them to go, mistakes, failures, all those things. And I think one of the crazy things about doing this many episodes is that you start to hear different things consistently. And that's one of the reasons I paused last year to really go through and hear about these different themes, topics that came about. And we came down and came across about 16 of those different topics. Now, while those 16 topics were great, I felt like it was a little too much. And as I start to, journey in this year, I wanted to drill down a little bit more to streamline what that looked like and how exactly you can create better experience for people that are listening to the podcast, but people that are just going through business overall. And when we started to come back into recording episodes, I had a lot more of a focus around us serving those builders, those people that are within usually the first couple years in business, first 5 years in business, and they're looking to try to level up. More than likely, they might be working more in the business rather than on the business and want to level up in some form, shape, or fashion so that they can get themselves out of the business. But what I started to realize as I go through the EOS process myself, and I referenced that in the blog post, but also through all the different aspects of business, you start to read more business books, is that there's a lot of different aspects of business. Are there as many as 16? I didn't really feel like there was, but I wanted to really drill down to get around maybe 7 different aspects. I felt like 7 definitely represents that completion, the end of a week, in so many different ways, but it still really didn't quite fit because there was a pillar that I felt needed to be included in everything that we were doing, and that was technology. So what I'm going to do for the sake of this is I really just want to celebrate the guests, the listeners, and everybody in between that have really been throughout this entire journey. But I also want to do a couple things. One, I really want to drill down for you some of those 8 pillars that I think are going to be integral for people that are trying to build their business. And I always talk about going from builders to architects, really to moguls or luminaries or whatever you might consider to be your rock star type of entrepreneurs. But most people are within that builder to architect phase, maybe a little bit even before that. The builder phase is often, I believe, started when you're thinking about that idea. That's to me like where that seed is planted about starting a business. And most people sometimes don't get beyond that idea. So what we really want to start doing throughout our sites and really start to drill down on how we can serve the builders, how we can get you to be more into being an architect. So you're working more on the business rather than in the business. You're thinking strategically about that business. And so the best way to kind of lay that out is to explain what exactly are the aspects of business? What exactly are all of these pieces that people think about when they're starting a business? So that's part of what I, focus on when I've been creating, the content lately is how to not necessarily create the content in a way that fits into these different pillars, but that these pillars fit around what the content has created. And I think going through each of these different 16 themes, the hundreds of CEO hacks and CEO nuggets that you hear consistently, I really wanted to nestle them and create these pillars that were in alignment with some of the known business principles, things like marketing and sales and operations, but also present a newer perspective and a kind of a fresh set of eyes on aspects like technology and understanding how all of these things are not pillars that are siloed, but actually they're pillars that are firmly intertwined. And that's one of the reasons technology was one of those big things. So I wanted to touch on that because to follow, you're going to hear and see more of us that are going to be around these different pillars. And I'm going to definitely touch on those pillars. But I also wanted to let you know that throughout some of these podcasts, I've talked very little throughout all of these interviews. I've had awesome guests on the show, and I've always wanted to highlight those guests, but you will start to see a lot more solo podcasts so that I think, start to distill down some of this information. One of the things that we wanted to do when we look at AI and different innovations that have happened, we've seen a transition where a lot of times people are not necessarily looking for all the information, they're looking for the exact answer. And that's what we want to try to provide a little bit more. We want to move a little bit away from like the haystack philosophy that we've had with the content and information to be able to provide more of a journey for people that are going through being a builder and wanting to become those architects within their business. So, with that being said, one of the big things that I really wanted to do was take you through this post. In this post, you're going to see a lot more information on what it means to be a builder versus an architect. Of course, we're going to drill down more on that. But more than anything else, you're going to find out what are those 16 things. As much as you want to hear about those 16 things, I think the reason you want to hear about those 16 things is because they become the 8 things. I started out with 7, as I mentioned, but really wanted to come to 8. And I'm just going to touch on them today. I'm going to spend some time during each of the interviews to kind of drill down a little bit more, those solo podcasts that you'll listen to. And you're like, hey, this is one of the pillars that you want to know. So, very first thing that you want to know is people. People are extremely important to the business and what exactly you do. I often say that you want to, of course, take care of the people within the organization, but don't forget that we are quote unquote people. We are the people that we want to kind of make sure that we're taking care of. So people is all inclusive. It includes building those relationships, those connections, and all those things that are super important within business. The next thing, number 2, is going to be operations. Operations is the flow of everything in the business. And this is probably case in point, one of the biggest examples that I wanted to share, because operations is one of those things that can definitely affect your product or service. It can affect you financially. It can affect you from a visibility standpoint. It can affect all these different aspects and other pillars that I'll kind of go through. So make sure the operations are the flow by which you're starting to get your product and service out there and what that looks like. But also understand, tying into that people part, you can have operations on a daily basis. Just think of something like your morning routine. That's how you operate to make sure that you're going to be your optimal self as much as the business itself is going to be optimal. The next thing is going to be strategy. And the strategy is one of the kind of founding reasons why the IMCO podcast was started. The IMCO podcast was started largely because we want to redefine what it means to be a quote unquote CEO. And the best way that we try to do that is we try to have different types of CEOs at different stages, different sizes, people that didn't even consider themselves CEOs, largely because we wanted to basically plant a seed about the strategy. Strategy is ultimately like how you're executing the thing that you're doing. It's extremely important, but it's also where you ultimately want to go. Like, what is your business going to look like? Is it always going to be a solo business? Is it going to be a business that grows into 100,000 employees? Is it going to be a business that only has 5 employees and looks to be acquired? Is it going to be a business that hopes to be sold? So all these aspects play a really big part into what it looks like and what it means to have that strategy. And then, of course, number 4 is going to be your product and service. How are you creating that impact for the ideal clients that you're working with? It's all about creating that solution. And I think so many times when I'll talk about a little bit more into entrepreneurship, we forget about it's all about creating a solution for a problem. While we love the shiny product, the widget, the thing that shines and does all the flips and tricks and all those things, it's super important that we understand that the product and service is how you're delivering that value to the people that you're serving. If we forget about that, then we forget about ultimately why we're doing the things that we do, which goes a lot into that strategy and that purpose, your why, and all of those things. Number 5, you hear it all the time if you listen to Shark Tank, if you listen to Mr. Wonderful, know thy numbers. You want to make sure that you have an understanding of all these different aspects and what the numbers are, your customer acquisition costs, your costs and budget for your marketing, your kind of number of full-time employees that you might have and what that costs and how much you're investing in technology, what's your churn rate, what's your cash flow looking like. All these things are such huge parts to your overall success in business. And it's extremely important that you have a good pulse on your financials, or at least be able to know where to ask and who to ask. And visibility is all around marketing, sales, public relations, advertising. How are you getting your name out there? After you have that really top-notch product or service that could provide value, how are you executing on that to make sure that people know who you are? That also fits into your strategy. Is your strategy fully evident in the thing that you do? As we start to see more and more businesses and organizations that are commoditized, the question now becomes, are you showing your secret sauce, as we like to call on the podcast, in every episode, and also in your business strategically, so that people know not just what you do, how you do it, but ultimately what makes you unique and what sets you apart. And I touched on technology. Technology is one of the things that I wasn't sure if I wanted to include under operations, but I feel like it's definitely its own thing. I feel like technology affects every aspect of business. So I wanted to make it its own pillar, not so that it stands alone, so that it's understood as it being fully integrated in everything that we do. It's not just integrated under operations. It's not just integrated under people. It's not just integrated under your product or service or it's financial or visibility. It's actually integrated in all those aspects. And as I think we start to look at technology and start to understand that technology can help support the things that we're doing, we start to see that it does overlap into every aspect of business. And often we've had, even during our topics each month, we say we're the technology company that does dot, dot, dot. And the reason for that is when you're the technology company that does dot, 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 it means you're technology first and then you're providing services later. So that's why that is number 7. And number 8 is entrepreneurship. And when we talk about entrepreneurship, we talk about that problem solving piece, but we also very much so talk about the heart of entrepreneurship. And I think so many times people get started, especially builders, they go through really difficult and challenging times. As a matter of fact, I'm having a difficult, challenging time for myself today. But I think the reality is that we could very quickly say, this is not what I'm made for. This is not what it's supposed to be. I'm doing it wrong because I'm not supposed to hit roadblocks, speed bumps, or any of those things. But the reality is that as you go through business, you start to realize that there are more and more issues that pop up. There are more and more fires that happen. And if you start to understand that is a part of entrepreneurship and also is very much so intertwined with success, you start to realize that that is part of the journey that goes hand in hand with it. You can't go through and have the success without having the failures, without having the things that go wrong. So understand that that is part of entrepreneurship and business, and being able to kind of solve the problems is at the core of that. So make sure that you are paying attention to what entrepreneurship truly is. And that's one of the really big pillars that I always kind of emphasize throughout podcasts and interviews, but really want to make sure that I touch on this today. So like I mentioned, prepare to see loads and loads of great information related to each of these pillars. I think we're going to start to segment a lot of the things that we're doing under these pillars and start to break up a lot of the content under those pillars as well too. But I'm super, super, super grateful to be doing 2,100 episodes of the IMCO podcast. And I'm truly, truly grateful that I get the opportunity to interview phenomenal people. And I'm even more grateful that you are listening to this. So truly appreciate you. If you have any questions or anything that we could do, definitely let us know. Of course, make sure you check out the show notes for this post so that you can give your 2 cents on these 8 pillars. I feel like there should be more, there should be less. But keep in mind that I have looked at things like EOS, the personal MBA. I've, read different articles and posts and try to combine as much as possible into what this means. And while these topics and these words are not necessarily all inclusive, what I hope to do is start to drill down a little bit more into ways that we can potentially do that. You might even see a course that breaks down exactly what that looks like and how you kind of strengthen each of those aspects. And I think so many times I just leave you with this. We think that we need to do all of the things. But often as a CEO, entrepreneur, business owner, a builder, whatever title you might give yourself, we don't realize that there is that quote unquote one thing. There are things that you can focus on that actually play a bigger and more impactful kind of result in your business, and they create that. So make sure that you are aware of the things, but you may not necessarily zero in on all of the things. And that's one of the things we want to make sure that we do. We help create it and make that a lot easier for people that are within that business to identify what that is and really start to drill down on how exactly they can improve that for themselves, their organizations, and all the people that they serve. So this is Gress signing out. Truly appreciate you again listening to this. Happy 2,100 of the IMCO podcast. If you've been a guest or you are going to potentially be a guest, you've definitely been a part of this. And even as a listener, if you haven't actually hopped on the other side of the microphone with me, you are a part of this. So thank you so much for doing this, and stay tuned for some awesome things we're going to work on.